My name's Ben. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Australian fintech WeMoney, overseeing all growth and marketing strategies and initiatives. I previously was an early B tech company in Unicorn Cover Genius, where I helped grow the company to hit unicorn status. Before that, I have a bit of a varied experience. I had a startup of my own that was in Y Combinator. I was an early employee of the fast-growing consumer brand in Australia, Co. And I worked at American Express in the US. And I also, as my educational background, went to Cornell University and have an MBA from Oxford. In terms of WeMoney, what we do, so we're the Australian leader in personal financial management. Our aim is to help all Aussies achieve their financial goals and really just have a better sense of financial wellness. We help people aggregate their financial accounts, track expenses, and see their credit scores, all for free, all in our app. And additionally, we have a feature that has a social community where people can share kind of financial tips and advice.
Maybe you can dive into a little bit more detail about your role as CMO in the company and sort of what your main marketing focus is at the moment and maybe sort of in the past as well leading up to today.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of my experience, because I've worked in technology for a while in kind of startups and scale-up companies, it's really colored by that. So because WeMoney, we're a finance app in this kind of fast-scaling technology space, as you would imagine, that means my kind of primary background and my kind of primary focus, it's really on digital marketing, growth marketing, and a ton of analytics. We do a lot of work, a lot of data-driven approaches to acquiring new customers, retaining customers, and building our membership base across social and paid acquisition platforms. The main ones that you'd think about, of course, Meta, TikTok, Google, Snapchat. So really my experience, my background is actually as a digital marketer, and my experience is really geared towards that domain. I also oversee, as you'd imagine, as being CMO, other aspects of our marketing, such as the overall marketing strategy, PR, brand, surveys, events, lifecycle marketing, and analytics.
Can you tell me about a particularly innovative or successful marketing campaign your team has recently executed?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2023, this is actually before I started with WeMoney, but I think it was such an important and impactful campaign. We actually ran a financial wellness survey, and we have this big community. We've been downloaded over 750K times in Australia. So we have this really big community, and we really wanted to get a sense of what do they have to say about society, about the economy, about their finances. And we really had an opportunity to get a lot of good data and explore how everyday Aussies really feel about the economy. It's been a very turbulent couple of years, as we all know. And I think we had some really profound insights that were interesting from a growth perspective and a marketing perspective, but just also really understanding what's going on in society here in Australia. Some of the insights were 40% of Australians, so 4 out of 10 Australians, are anxious currently about their financial situation. 50% of Australians are actually living paycheck to paycheck with little to no savings. 84% of respondents actually say that the cost of housing is unaffordable. So virtually everybody in Australia is saying housing's unaffordable. And it's these insights that I think, they're really good from a PR and a press and a kind of content angle, but I think it gave us really deep insights into how our customers are feeling. And then from a product perspective and a feature perspective, can actually build things into our finance app that actually helps them at a deeper level.
As you said, there is a lot of change sort of recently and especially over the last couple of years. And, maybe sort of with that, at the moment, what's your biggest marketing challenge?
It's a great question. So as we kind of mentioned before, the kind of vast majority of my career has been in this technology space, or startup space, high growth, scale-up type companies. And it's interesting because obviously there's been a big shift over the past couple of years with all this macroeconomic turbulence. Before 2022, my job, I consider myself a growth marketer. My job was all about growth, of course. That didn't mean things were easy. That doesn't mean it was just spend money and get the result. It was still a lot of work and a lot of analytical work, but it just meant that the focus was really on top line. It was around scale. It was around revenue. It was around growing users, all these things. And then in 2022, as we all know in tech, the world changed generally, and then the world changed like even faster in the tech world. So we had this inflation after the pandemic. It led to high interest rates around the world and just caused a collapse in VC funding. So I think VC funding was around 680 billion in 2021, and it actually went down to about 224 billion in 2023. Absolutely massive change. The upshot is that tech is still alive and kicking. We're still here, but the expectations from the market and the expectations from investors, which kind of filters down, the expectations from your CEO or the founder you're working with, it's all changed. And so now the big challenge is you still need that top line growth and you need that scale, but you need to achieve it while also being profitable. So now you're kind of, instead of just focusing on one thing and executing that, you're actually doing two things at the same time, but two things that somewhat have a little bit of an inherent tension between the two goals. So there's so much more focus these days on, business fundamentals, unit economics of products. And for me, that's the biggest challenge. It's really, you need to grow sustainably and profitably.
Definitely. And so I imagine that scene, you have to get a bit more creative and but focused at the same time.
That's right. For me, and we can talk about this more, but the focus, it just, we were always making data-driven decisions, but data has never become more important. It's kind of like you're threading a needle and you need to make these really, really marginal calls. And I think the focus on analytics and data is more in the kind of industry than I've ever seen it before.
In terms of how your company stays ahead of its competitors in terms of marketing, how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll actually talk about WeMoney, which I joined as Chief Marketing Officer a couple of months ago. And then I was also head of marketing for APAC at the Unicorn Cover Genius. And it's actually interesting. A lot of the kind of core competencies are actually quite similar across both companies. The first one's data. It's the heart of everything we do. And all critical decisions are made kind of extremely data-led. Like the focus on analytics is almost hard to emphasize. Like these days, if you want to achieve both growth and profitability, you need to be like a master of your data. The second thing, and this is really common across both companies, WeMoney and Cover Genius, is not accepting the kind of industry standard and always finding a new way to look at a problem. And I know that kind of sounds cliche, but if you do things the industry norm way, you're going to get industry norm results. And for like a high growth technology company, that's frankly just not acceptable. And so I think both companies really built a culture of actually trying to figure out new ways of doing things. One interesting way this manifests itself is actually finding people who actually don't necessarily have like a particular background, but having them do that role. So they bring in different experience into the arena. And it kind of relates to my third point. And I think this is really important for all kind of CMOs, C-suite founders, anyone leading a group of people, just hire the best. This is what I've seen at both companies. And, for CMO in particular, you're only one person. You're only as good as the team that surrounds you. And when I look back at my time at companies where things were really firing, it's because we were surrounded by an amazing team.
So in your opinion, what does the future of marketing look like?
Great question. For me, the future of marketing, it's all around performance creative. So in 2023, digital ad spending was just a bit over $600 billion globally. It's a very natural step. Like it's going to pass $1 trillion in the next couple of years, definitely by 2030. So digital really is the future of marketing. And what that means is you actually need a team of people who can both understand the data coming in through your digital ad platforms, but also the ability to translate that data into really compelling messaging, into really unique content, into ads that resonate with your customers. So I think the future of marketing is people who are both quantitative, but also creative.
I think that comes through in a lot of people we chat to is, data is great, but to be able to use it efficiently and like you say, with a creative mind on that maybe other people aren't doing is what's going to separate people.
That's exactly right. I actually find from my time in companies, it's so interesting because data is such a buzzword. Everyone thinks they use data well. The hard part of data isn't having it. The hard part is actually understanding the kind of story from the data and using that to guide your performance effectively.
So, it's a very hard question. What is the role of a chief marketing officer in one word, and why?
Hmm. That is a really difficult question. I think I'd sum it up as lead. Your goal as a CMO is to lead. And the reason I say that, it actually goes back to our previous question of, surrounding yourself with the best talent. Your goal as a CMO is to hire the best people. It's to mentor them. It's to develop them. It's to get in the weeds when they have a really kind of difficult problem. It's to challenge them. And I think it comes back to the fact that, as a CMO, you're only one person and you need to be surrounded and you need to lead a team and surround yourself with a team because you're only going to be as good as them. Your performance as a CMO will only be as good as your performance of the person who does PR in your team and the person who understands your brand and the person who runs your surveys and events and the person who runs your digital marketing channels.
Yeah, I totally agree, and maybe that leads nicely on to the next question, because you talk about that sort of mentoring and hiring, and so maybe what career advice would you give to marketing leaders out there to get up to that CMO level?
I love this question. There's one that absolutely sticks out in my mind, and that would be I'd foster resilience. I'd foster resilience in yourself and I'd foster resilience in your team. In every job I've ever had, especially actually for the companies that have done really well, um, it's actually not just like fun and games, of course, right? It's not all charts that are up and to the right. Every company I've ever been in has had almost existential level challenges. And I think it's actually the ability to kind of face those challenges head on. I would almost call it you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, develop that grit, develop that persistence. Because here's the thing, to me, grit and persistence aren't natural traits, they're learned habits. You have to be able to take those challenges and actually learn from repetition how to confront a very stressful situations in a kind of calm, thoughtful way. By the way, this is doubly true, especially nowadays, for those who work in kind of startups or tech. You have to be comfortable in these often very uncomfortable situations. The other one I want to add, so the first one is foster resilience, but I do want to add one other one, which is building relationships. And this is, we're in the days of like AI, everything, automation, everything. And I do that a lot of my work. But what I actually find is that like there's this funny trend, which is like the more things are automated online in your work life and the more you see AI, actually, it's the people who have really deep relationships that are actually doing really well. I think of hiring as a really good example. Now it's so easy to create a resume and apply to 1,000 jobs. So I actually see the people who are getting hired for different jobs, the ones who have relationships with people at the company currently. So I really think as we go into the world of AI and automation, relationships are going to matter more than ever.